Today we are speaking with Jeff Gross, who just submitted an impressive paper in an epic documentary entitled The Formation and Legacy of the Liberties and Customs of Late Medieval London. I read the paper. It's amazing. So I'm going to assume that our listeners have as well. Mr. Gross, how can you claim so emphatically that these liberties that you speak of are the reason that London became the financial powerhouse that it is today? It's not like you have any actual proof.
Thank you, Susan. I know what you mean. There's no regression analysis that we can run where we examine the growth of the port, the wealth of the city, the dominance of the empire, with statistical attribution versus each of the individual liberties and when they were extended. But because of the liberties, we have a non-titled mercantile class governing the city without interference from their Norman overlords. Even though we have craft guilds all over Europe, in London, the leaders of the guild become the aldermen of the city. Just as the leadership established the rules of the trade, they're now establishing municipal ordinance and setting up an environment that is conducive to commerce. When we start to talk about royal charters, this is where London is really different and where there's an obvious direct link from the liberties. As we move into a post-feudal society, the government in Westminster, and that's the Crown and Parliament, is going to start to rely on the commercial expertise in the city as they establish royal charters to supervise evolving fields, such as medicine. Even the equivalent of what we would today call the Bureau of Weights and Measures, the government thought was best handled by the City of London. As exports become an even bigger business, the port becomes more important. And who's responsible for what is going to become the world's busiest port? It's the Mayor of London. That office, which was defined in King John's notification of confirmation of liberties to the men of London of 1199 CE.
That is absolutely brilliant. You are every bit as smart as you are handsome. When you frame it this way, the causal line between the liberties and an emergent London is unbroken. You claim that William the Conqueror erroneously extended the liberties to London.
Multitudes, especially in the county of York, perished through me by famine or the sword. I fell upon the English of the northern shires like a ravening lion. I commanded their houses and corn and all their implements and chattels to be burnt without distinction, and large herds of cattle and beasts of burden to be butchered wherever they were found. It was then that I took revenge on multitudes of both sexes by subjecting them to the calamity of cruel famine. I became the barbarous murderer of many thousands, both young and old.
London got off easy. Every one of these royal charters extending further liberties is a clawback of Anglo-Saxon power from the victorious Norman overlords and their heirs, the Plantagenets. But a mere 14 years later, Henry I comes to them asking for money, and how do they respond? Here's what you're going to do for us in exchange for the money you want. And the reason we can make the case that William went into this bargain in error is
because the Normans didn't rely on the wealth from trade, only from land.
And now, a conquered people within city walls have managed to accomplish what thousands of rebellious warriors in the countryside could not. A conquered people have retained the resources, they've accumulated the wealth to apply leverage against their foreign overlords. We don't know how cities are taxed elsewhere in Europe. If we could easily assess the records and find out how the Holy Roman Emperor is taxing Lombardy or how the wealth from trade is taxed in Constantinople, then we could prove that the Norman failure to appreciate the wealth from trade is an error on the part of William. But as it stands now, we really can't say whether it's a sign of the times or short-sightedness on William's part or both.